Hey, what's up, everybody? In this episode, I talked to our good friend Greg Pettit, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know over the last 3 years as I've embarked on my career as a live painter. Greg's work is hard to describe, but the best I can do to put it into perspective for somebody who might just be chiming in is that his art portrays a very psychedelic landscape of interwoven patterns that repeat over each other to create a sort of geometric interlocking of structure where there's clearly activity between light emerging into form within the realms of a spacious environment that somehow clings to the familiarity of certain surreal art. And that kind of clarity into our friend Greg's imagination is the reason why I've asked him to come onto the show. Among other things, he is helping teach a workshop at Co-Creation Music Festival, and it will be by far one of the best ways to introduce yourself into a creative experience and a process that is bound to only expound and become more beautiful over time by simply investing a little bit of time into this person's attention. And I say it like it's some sort of awesome happening, because in reality it is, and I for one feel very lucky to have been able to collaborate with this man in a communicative talk, but also in a workshop for this upcoming festival. Please stay tuned if you're interested in what I'm trying to get a feel for in this brief description. Thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. Tap in, open up, and art on, my friends. All right. Hey, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Greg Pettit. He's one of the best artists in the Austin area, and he's also the featured artist for Co-Creation Music Festival. Hey, Greg.
Hey, what's up, Will? How's it going?
Well, not too much is going on right now because it's just you and me in the RV, but in reality, there's so many things going on right now, it's almost stressful, but it's a good kind of like work stress. I don't know if you know what that's like.
Yeah, no. I mean, if you're not busy, you're not productive. At least I'm like that.
So, the big thing about being productive as an artist, though, is it almost determines like how far you get as an artist, right?
I think so. I think you just have to keep things happening to force yourself to kind of like stick to a schedule and get things done. I feel like if you don't keep that momentum, it's very easy to lose track of time. And I've been in that space this year a little bit. I paint a lot less when I'm not painting for a show, even though I'll tell myself I hate rushing through art to get stuff done, but if I don't have any pressure on me at all, it just doesn't motivate me in the same way. So
that kind of pressure, that's why I set deadlines for myself that freak me out. Do you ever do that? Like make a deadline that's like really cutting it close?
Yeah, I think you should always kind of make deadlines that are much harder than what you'll need to make, because I know I procrastinate. So if I tell myself I need to finish this painting in a week, I know it's probably going to take me 2 or 3 weeks, but as long as I actually have 2 or 3 weeks, then it's fine. It's just that psychological thing of like, you really need to get going on this.
Yeah, and you know what? That time expenditure is something that you actually kind of turned my mind onto in that weird way that painting like truly eats away at your time, because a whole day of painting doesn't seem like that large a memory for, I mean, at least in my mind. Like somehow spending the whole day hiking up a mountain seemed like more time in my mind than like sitting in front of the canvas all day. I don't know why.
Yeah, and it's weird too, because I mean, I kind of like paint by a schedule. Like, I have scheduled blocks of time where I know I'm going to be painting, because if I don't do that, I lose a lot of time and I lose a lot of days, because things happen, you know, and when you're busy, it's just like, okay, I know I get up at 7 every day, so I'm going to paint from 8 to noon.
That's
possibly
awesome.
More at night, but like, as long as I can like schedule those chunks of time, it keeps me going. But time itself is very relative when you're painting. I mean, there's times when I do like amazing stuff in a short amount of time, and then there's other times where I just drag on forever, you know? So it's almost like, it's almost hard to kind of predict what's going to happen in a given painting session.
Well, so that leads to an interesting question I really want to ask you. It's because you've been making art a bit longer than I have, but your paintings have also like seemed to develop really into like a state of uniqueness that is it's hard to conceive how somebody gets to a point and it's like, this is finished, because the paintings are so, you know, I don't want to say vague because they're very detailed, but it's abstract in the sense that the expression seems like it could go on forever. So like, how do you know when one of your pieces is finished?
That's a complicated question. It really depends on how I'm working. Because a lot of my stuff is obviously like based on references, but I'll just add some embellishment into it. Those are actually a lot easier to wrangle in terms of finishing them, because I have a pretty strict idea of what I'm doing. So it's really the stuff where I'm working purely out of my imagination, you know, like doing warped patterns and whatnot, or just crazy kind of chaotic stuff that I'm molding. That's the stuff that could really go on forever, because like you said, there's nothing to dictate what you're actually going for, because the piece just keeps developing as you work on it. I look at it like this though, rather than continuing to make it more and more complex, I think you're in a better spot if you can get to a point where you're like, okay, this is all the shit that's going to be in this painting. Now I need to start backing up and like washing some of it out and letting some of it fade off, and that way you actually are moving towards something that's more finished, because you've already decided not to take it further.
That's an interesting step to go through, because I know like when I first started making art, I loved every single detail so much. I thought I was sparing my art like some beauty by like deleting certain informations or not, but in reality, it seems to me that being a painter does have somewhat of like an ego check within it, because you begin to tell yourself like, you know, this is, you know, I am making this, but it's also for somebody else. And in that regard, the idea should be coherent for them to understand too.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe? I'm not sure.
No, I think that's true.
It's like a shamanistic thing where like you've got such a crazy idea, and I love the fact that all my art friends use the word crazy to describe their art. I mean, Elliot Rogers and I, we talk about how we need a new word for it, because crazy is almost it's like it's almost not doing it justice, because it's like sharper than that, I think. But
it's crazy in the sense that it represents a state of consciousness that is not ordinary and not part of you know what would be considered a normal state of mind, I guess. Painting 11 years, I still don't know how to answer that question when people ask what I paint. I really can't answer it. Like, it's so difficult for me to come up with even a few words to describe what I paint. Because if I say, like, oh, I'm an abstract painter, or I'm a psychedelic painter, it comes with all these, like, preconceived notions of what I'm doing, and I don't feel like that does enough to represent what it is I'm actually doing. So I generally just pull out my phone and start showing them pictures because I don't know how else to describe it.
You know what? My understanding of the historical aspect of abstract art is that it's significantly minimalistic.
Yeah.
And
right, and so it comes with that baggage. Like if I say I'm an abstract painter, you're imagining me just like doing some crazy giant brush strokes and splattering some paint.
Like
and
toothpaste on the canvas.
Yeah. So a lot of people look down on that kind of art as something that's not really all that difficult to create, and I think there is actually some really beautiful and amazing abstract art, even if it is done quickly. I'm all into like different techniques you can use to manipulate paint, and some of that stuff is extremely easy, but the effect achieved is amazing. So I can look at that from both sides. But just the fact that I do tend to actually incorporate a lot of realism into what I do, even though the end result is still very abstract, it's like I don't know how to in a simple way describe that to people who haven't seen it. I
think that's why art in general, your art especially, is so significant towards the idea that you can like communicate real ideas through art, and that the imagination is a real place, and that maybe there is a language barrier between like how your imagination is like almost a separate plane. It's not if you have an overactive imagination, it can be considered a hindrance to your social life.
Yeah.
but reality is just a derivative of like whatever we can imagine to create, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, in my mind, the things we imagine precede reality, so it is both the terrain of like completely crazy impossible things, but it's also the plane of existence that gives birth to everything that eventually manifests in our actions and creations. So it's both.
In the manifestation parts, I think that's like the second step in the process of laying down those intention strokes that you were talking about when you're creating the beginnings of these abstract paintings. And that's kind of like what you're going to be doing in the workshop series at Co-Create, is like choosing some colors and having the intention to create beauty. And a lot of times I think those pieces of art that are like, underworked, overpriced, people think that it was not enough effort goes into it. Maybe the issue with that is not enough intention went into it, because you can sit in front of a painting and work on it for 4 hours with intention, and then maybe the day before you had worked on a painting without any intention at all, and I imagine that would have a totally different outcome. And that intention that you're planting manifests the idea that you're trying to express, and that's the therapeutic aspect of art. Like, has art ever served as like a weird therapy for you? I know for me it definitely has.
Absolutely. I mean, I really consider painting to be my religion or my yogic practice.
That's awesome.
It's what I do to escape the normal state of mind I'm locked into when I'm doing other kinds of things. So to me it is a way out, and it's also a way deeper within. I don't do it too much anymore, but there was a time where I used to get up at like 5 a.m. and paint in silence. I wouldn't put any music on or anything.
Dude, I love doing that.
And the reason I liked it is because you're so fresh from a dream state and then immediately going into an altered state painting that it just, and everything's quiet around you. Your neighbors are all asleep. There's no cars or traffic, or your kids aren't awake or whatever. And it used to put me into a really deep state. Like I would recover like really old childhood memories and stuff.
That's beautiful. Like good ones?
Yeah, good ones.
Sometimes bad ones?
Occasionally, yeah, it would bring up everything, just standing there in silence and painting. I tend to not do that too much anymore. I'm more into like listening to music or podcasts or whatever, because it just makes it more kind of informal, and I do like that informal feeling when I'm painting. I hate painting and feeling like I have to be doing things perfectly, because it's like as
Interesting.
soon as I put that on myself, it becomes difficult and unpleasant. And as long as I'm just like, I'm just gonna have fun, I know what I'm doing, then it easily comes out.
Oh yeah, I had to tell myself early on, like, never try to make a perfect thing. Like, always just try to create something that resembles perfect symmetry, like, because if you, like, try to reflect symmetry, don't beat yourself up if you can't make it look exactly like the beautiful moving vision that you were like met with. That sitting in the morning thing, man, that really struck a chord with me, because I used to do that out in San Marcos, and like only listen to the sound of like the paintbrush on the canvas, and it sounded like just really, it almost reminded me of like combing sand or something. So let me ask you this. For a lot of people who see the art that we make, it might seem unapproachable because of the complexity level. And I think that a large part of that is maybe like a resistance towards what's new. And so how this is like an interesting problem, I think, that needs to be talked about. It's like how to like either smooth the edges of this growing phenomenon that is like the new age art movement. I mean, I guess that's what it is, but how to present that more to like people within the world who might not be used to it, because I know that people will see things, and if they're not ready to hear, see, or talk about it, they'll deny it or won't see anything at all. Do you kind of get what I'm trying to ask? Like, how is there a word to make it political almost?
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of why there's some amount of variation in what I've been doing the last couple of years. I've actually been thinking more and more about getting into an abstract style that still has the language I've built for all these years, but is more approachable. You know, I think people can relate to it when it's really off the wall. I think, or like extremely overt. I think that's where you start getting resistance, you know. In my work, I've always kind of tried to stay away from like explicitly representing like ideas or symbols that would relate back to certain belief systems. I try to keep it as ambiguous as possible, because I feel like in doing that, it does make it open to the viewer to decide exactly what it is they're looking at.
That's really shamanistic of you. I hope you don't mind me saying, because that membrane you're creating is one that is like, it's like a hug from the other side. And I think that you're smart to do that with the ambiguous relativity of it all. because people will project whatever spirituality or religion they retain onto the art. And I mean, I'm really big into that idea, because I definitely project that aspect of myself into my art.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key behind my intention, is finding a way to like spin the disc of my art in a way that'll be sustainable. That's the whole point of this podcast, is to like, you know, project my intentions to the world, because I know that there's people out there that understand people like you and me. And I mean, I'm not just talking about the friends that'll listen to this because we're friends, but I'm talking about like people all over the world who have had experiences that could be conceived as psychedelic, but might not even know what that word really means. Because I know sober people who don't trip on anything, but you know, they're pretty trippy. They're pretty
absolutely.
psychedelic.
I mean, there's so many ways to achieve altered states that I hate how the conversation always sort of seems contained within this idea of using drugs, because there's a lot of ways to explore your minds. I mean, you can use, for me, a long time it was different dreaming techniques. That's still pretty important to me. But everything affects your consciousness. The things you eat, whether you're properly hydrated, how much sleep you've gotten.
Dude, I smell bad. If I eat meat, I smell worse. It's like, I swear, if you don't eat a lot of cheese or a lot of meat, you smell better. Is that a surprise to anybody?
I don't know. I haven't tried. I gotta eat meat, man.
Fair enough.
But I respect if you don't,
I actually eat meat occasionally.
Yeah.
Like, for me, it's all about intention. Like, I kind of draw the line on pizza meat. I don't know why.
I don't like processed meat, and really, like, I mainly like fish and chicken. I don't eat a lot of beef or pork or anything like that.
So, we kind of went off on the tangent, but I want to touch base back on what you said about how mind-opening spirituality these days and the level of art that we present to people is often coupled with this stereotype of ingesting or consuming drugs. And I think that that's the beautiful part of the entire nature of the spectrum of society. And I know that was like a long string of words, but what I'm trying to say is that I don't think that drugs are for everybody, especially the psychedelic ones. You see, I think that medicine is for everybody. Medicine is a right as much as your breath is.
Yeah.
But being conscious and aware is as much as medicine as anything. And if you need to, or have had a situation where you have been able to use psychedelics, and that gets you to a point where you feel like you've expanded consciousness, I think that's just as applicable towards the life that or our experience that we all live, as creating a piece of art that really makes you feel like you're tripping.
Yeah.
And a lot of these paintings that I've made, I don't openly admit this to a lot of people, mostly because it doesn't really come up a lot, but I don't trip a lot when I make these paintings. Because
you don't need to, because you're entering into that in another way.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, I know that we are inspired by our use of psychedelic drugs, but the drugs themselves are not what's important. It's what it opens you up to in terms of sensing this this pattern or under structure that sort of flows through everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't promote using drugs, and I don't. I'm not against it either. I think that's something everyone should have their free will to decide for themselves.
Drug is kind of a loaded word, isn't it? It kind of sounds like thug.
Yeah.
And it's got like an UGG, like UGG boots are like, they're advertised as being like ugly.
Yeah.
And so this concept of entheogen has come around that is really promoting of like the setting, mind-opening like experience that people covet. Like, they truly covet that stuff. But I think that after my crazy experience through life, that I covet my family and their wisdom more than a lot of other stuff. Like, how much I really want to find the secrets of being a human through those relationships, and like how we share life is so important. And I mean, I've realized some of those things on psychedelics, but more recently, how I've decided to chase the art lifestyle is what's really connected my family more than anything. Like,
yeah,
I think that the companionship aspect of any self-realization, like, oh, I'm here to be a companion to people, or like help others be, it's kind of a run-on sentence, but it isn't, if you know what I'm talking about. Like, it seems like the more you can help people experience life, through art or music or podcasts, if someone's listening to this and they feel really connected to it, I feel like that's a sense of being alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel the same way. Like, making art and being inspired to make art is like one side of it, but without having people giving me that feedback and giving me that love and appreciating what I'm doing, that's really what completes it. It doesn't mean nearly as much to me to just keep it all in a way where it has no impact on others, because I want to inspire people, and I want people to see what I'm doing and think about what it means and let those ideas, have meaning in their life.
It seems to me that as an artist, the more you inspire people, the better off you are in the long run. Or like the more people you help realize how important art is.
Yeah.
Kind of like evangelistic in a way, but like you're not saying anything. You're just making art.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I've noticed is that when I take the time to go take workshops under the artists that I really care about, like I'm going to take your workshop at Co-Creation, I feel where they're coming from more.
Yeah.
And that heart-to-heart is not unlike empathy. And when you realize that it's like a team effort.
Yeah.
Because I know that, I think I've known you for like 2 or 3 years or something.
3 years.
But I've known people longer than that I don't feel a connection in the same way, just because we're like art brothers or something like that.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, dude. I mean, when I look at the language of form that you use, it's like it's so fundamental to me. It's like I would do the same thing,
Right. Yeah, thanks, man.
So it's just,
Thank you.
I do feel that immediate connection to people who just have a brain that's geared towards articulating form in that way.
I love artists that have an urgency about them.
Yeah.
Like people who, I've met a few of my musical heroes, and there's like a really, when I did meet them, there was like an urgency in their tact. There was like a kind of like I've been misunderstood and I'm trying to really be heard right now.
Yeah.
Thing, and that level of being an artist is a fun one, because it can be neurotic at times.
Yeah, it's, there's times when I'm working on stuff and if I'm really into what I'm working on, mm-hmm. I suddenly become afraid of dying, because I'm like, oh shit,
Whoa.
What if I get in a car wreck today and don't finish this painting?
Whoa.
So I can become hyper obsessed with finishing something if I'm really into it.
Whoa.
I try not to live that way though, but that is something that's when you really feel committed to doing something, you just want to get it done and over with and make sure it happens before anything else in life gets in the way.
Dude, yeah. That's how I am with electronic music sometimes. I'm bad. I noticed, in my family, it runs in the family to put work before a lot of stuff. And I don't think that's an incompassionate thing. I think that it's just, there's an urgency to provide.
Yeah, it's practical. You gotta be able to survive,
Yeah.
So money is not what you worship, but it is fundamental to just making your life work.
Yeah, and I'll say right now, we're doing all these episodes from my RV that I've been staying in for over a year. I'm coming up on 2 years living in this RV that leaks when it rains, but it's cozy and full of art, so I'm never bored. I have to get the fuck out of here sometimes, but that's what life's about, I think.
Yeah.
Getting the fuck out of here.
I want to live in an RV when I'm old.
Nice, dude.
That's what my wife and I talk about. It's just
no way.
When the kids are
little
grown,
house.
just
It is pretty much that.
Yeah.
I
So
what?
I appreciate it.
That's what my girlfriend wants too. She wants a little home real bad. I've been in huge houses and I just think they're haunted. But it's like, no, I'm the ghost that haunts this place. I mean, if this place is haunted, it's cramped. Can I ask you about your festival history? Because I know, like, you've lived in the Austin area for a minute. Part of my life, just to relate it back to you, is the Austin music festival scene. Like, how have you seen or witnessed that grow since you've lived here?
You know, I really didn't. I mean, I haven't done a whole lot of festivals. I guess I started in 2012.
Okay.
It seems like it has gotten crazy bigger over the years.
Yeah.
Not just in terms of like people attending individual ones, but just like the number of them.
Do you think that's because it's lucrative, which it's not, or because we need it?
I just think you have a lot of, you know, a younger, like, music loving audience that just gets into that as a form of entertainment, you know.
It's hard to think of because I'm like so within it, it's hard to see what it is. You know, like I can't do the 10-foot step back looking at, like, you know, it is weird. Like, I always think about how weird it must have been to see the technology age turn. You know, like, one day, you know, it's like pubes in porn. One day it was just gone. And then, like, one day in society, people just had their face in their phone all the time.
Yeah. God, I'm trying to get out of that habit, too, because that's such a weird one, to be locked into this thing all day.
Well, you like H.R. Giger, right?
I am...
Or you familiar, at least?
Well, absolutely. I mean, he's definitely a big influence on me. I don't know that I necessarily like it in the sense that it's that it comes from a place that I feel like is happy or inspiring. You know, it's pretty dark.
Well, I heard that he took a lot of opium, like frequently every day, to counteract his schizophrenia.
Huh.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard him say that he had to paint to stay sane, and I understand that because your mind can truly become engorged. You can make yourself go nuts if you're a really creative person and you don't exercise that energy.
That's the neurosis I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Giger's art was just, you know, the stuff that I like the most is the stuff that's more sort of abstract, landscapey. Mm-hmm. When it gets into all the, like, evil orgy kind of stuff, I'm not as...
Evil orgy stuff.
I love his technique. You know, he's one of the main people that inspired me to start airbrushing. Mm-hmm. And I actually, yeah, I mean, there's definitely more things I like about him than I don't like from, like, a technical point of view, mm-hmm. but it's just the vibe I get from it that gets kind of dark for me.
That's exactly why I brought it up, though, is because a lot of his art is this. I mean, he's also known as being more or less the person to invent the biomech aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's who. I can't think of a person that I would rather assume it with. Maybe Guy Atkinson, but that was like, I want to say, a completely different era.
Yeah.
Some of H.R. Giger's work is this biomech fusion between technology and organic matter, and oftentimes it's consisting of, like, these humanoid structures that have been warped into technology, and it's starting to look more familiar.
And see, the whole idea of biomech is extremely important to me. It's just, in my mind, I look at it differently. I look at it like there is no separation between man and machine.
Oh, I like that.
The principles of design we see that we consider to be artificial are really just the same thing we see in nature filtered through our imagination and put out into these things that we make, but I don't really believe that they're truly, like, opposed to each other. I think that it all flows from the same sort of
that's a pretty
language of form.
That's a pretty idea, because I think it creates, well, the first time I ever heard somebody outside of my own loony self talk about that, it was actually Alan Watts saying that, like, the separation we create between humanity, nature, and technology is a caste system. Well, he didn't say this. I'm kind of just going freelance right now, but it is effectively like this weird caste system where like humanity dominates nature, but technology is like clearly on an upper echelon of what is about to be understanding.
Yeah.
I mean, it's computational understanding already through artificial intelligence. There's a big question there about whether the singularity already exists. See, I think that the singularity exists, but we're not looking in the right place. Like, what we were talking about 20 minutes ago, about the imagination not being a separate place from reality, I think that's the singularity that happened. And it shouldn't be quantified as, like, reality, rather, as, like, mind and body. Because there is a balance between the two. It is here, and it's happening right now.
Yeah.
And that freaks me out when I start getting to a point where I think about the mesh between those two. I kind of don't even want to paint anymore, because it's like it's almost dehumiliating. I mean, depersonalizing. It's like consciousness on that level is just like this thing that exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in like a bottomless cave that's echoing through like the voices of what we can imagine. That's a weird painting to create for anybody listening. I just went off. Sorry. Well, I'm not sorry, but do you kind of get what I'm saying? How there's such a connection that it's almost soul crushing. Because it's like you're helplessly unified with everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, going back to the whole machine versus nature thing, I can't fathom, because all of this is on the physical plane, that there's anything that could truly be called unnatural, because we are part of nature, and therefore, the robot I build is every much a part of nature as like a beaver building a dam with a bunch of sticks. It's just an animal taking what's available to them and using their minds to create something with a purpose for their needs.
Exactly. This idea of anything that exists on this plane being unnatural, I agree. Totally silly. But what about the things that exist outside of nature? That would certainly be the imagination realm, right? Because I'm looking at nature when I'm talking to you, but I can't see your imagination unless I'm looking at the piece of art that I have that is great. Where'd I hang up your art? Oh, it's over by my bed. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that there is a place outside of nature that could be considered like the in-nature, and I mean that's my own word, and that's kind of what this tap in symbol means. Like that symbol is like a weird concept I'm trying to understand. That's like a weird place.
But maybe that's not outside of nature. Maybe that's just the part of nature we haven't been able to define because it's not easily apprehended by the five senses, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's nothing there.
Yes, absolutely. There's
got to be some sort of
language
matrix or template that makes things fall into place, in my opinion. Like there's always got to be something that precedes the manifestation that allows it to crystallize and become real.
And that's so interesting, because that same place we're talking about, from like strictly a creative artistic perspective, is like that high spiritual realm that people base religion and like other things off of, or cooking. I cook from that place because it's like a creative place, but that's how I live my life. Like I choose to breathe from that same place, or do something like that. How has like your imagination grown? Is that like a weird question to ask? Because we were talking about how it's a muscle that is expressed or
no, that's a totally That's an easy question for me because I have my art to look at, you know. So it's like I can look at what I was doing when I was like a kid or in my teens and compare it to my 20s and now my 30s, and it's like, you know, when I was younger, it was, it wasn't from a place of knowing very much. I basically was only obsessed with sex and death in my teens into my early 20s, so that ends up being something that you see a lot in my art. And then as I got older, it started becoming more abstract. It started, like, my older art was very flat. There wasn't a lot of playing with foreground and backgrounds and that kind of stuff. So I think you see a move more towards landscape and architectural elements and sort of fantastic machinery kind of elements coming into it that definitely wasn't there before. So it seems like my imagination went from being more of like a primal human state into something that was more spiritual and intellectual in terms of what I was trying to tackle.
So how has that creative aspect of your imagination, like, translated towards interpersonal relationships? Like, do you find yourself being more creative with how you find compassion for people too?
Yeah, and that's been such a big part of growing up for me, because when I was, you know, younger, I just went through some really hard experiences that caused me to close up emotionally for a long time, and I really didn't notice how much that affected me throughout a lot of my 20s. And it's like, the older I've gotten, I definitely see that, and it has, in a way, corresponded with being an artist. If for no other reason than that's given me attention from people I might not have gotten otherwise. So it's actually brought people to me in a way that I couldn't have done earlier in life.
I was talking about that with the Chili Peppers, how, like, their shows, you know, people went because you could score there. You know, they were deep in it. Just, and it's interesting because it seems like the open-minded perspective is a cradle for all those kinds of activities, and that I talked about this on my last podcast, how, like, that bog trench that is not unusual for people to go through this day and age. There's so many freedoms to just instantly gratify at every turn, and, you know, not a lot of illumination on the hard work, long-term reaping of the sowing of the seeds stuff. You know, it's hard to illuminate that because there's so much instant gratification today that it is a bit of it's accessible. It's an accessible life that I think I relate to very much too. The honesty in going through those dark experiences is that you find a way to have real compassion for people who are going through that same thing right now, or have gone through it too.
That's very true.
And I think the weirdness that we've been through adds to the weirdness in our art, because the weirder your life gets, the weirder your art can be. Don't try that at home.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly. I don't want to say that you need, like, pain or trauma to become an artist, but I think that a lot of creative people just sort of live more on the edge, emotionally, and in the way they live their lives, that just lends itself to, like, having a troubled life, I guess, or at least an unorthodox life compared to how a lot of people live.
It's an interesting situation here in America. You know, it's like, honestly, really lucky to live here. So, like, it's hard to go hungry here. Where I live, and I know that's a blessing. Yeah. I know that's a blessing. I know where the food banks are. Because I know that, I'm lucky. That's nuts to me, because there's tons of people I meet who don't know where those are, and, you know, it's like, I try to tell them, but the only reason I know is because I've been super fucking hungry to the point where I didn't even have money to buy stuff, so I had to volunteer at the food bank to get food. Like, and so on the street, when I'm like carrying my paintings and people like asking me for money, it's like, dude, it's like, I wish I could show you how I've been camping for the last year.
Yeah.
In the name of art. Oh man. Man,
that's a hard one, because I'm definitely compassionate towards the homeless, but having worked downtown for many years, I also saw the other side of that. And so I definitely believe we should be using tax money to do what we can to alleviate that situation, but handing out cash, I think generally is not a good idea.
You know what? Last time something really, really interesting happened. This one woman has started showing up in front of Empire every Wednesday. I think she's getting the clue or something that there's some really compassionate, charitable people at that place every Wednesday. And and I come outside and she comes up. I think she's mute. She's just giving me the hands out, like, you know, in the eyes, the begging gesture, you know, really archetypal gesture. And I have nothing except my art on me. And the last time I tried to give somebody a piece of art to sell on the street, they weren't about it. And so I was like, I'll just give you a hug. And I gave her a hug, and then I looked down on the ground, and there was $5 in ones just sitting on the ground, like right below me. And I realized, like, oh, I can definitely give her that money. And so I was like, here, have this. And I picked it off the ground and I gave it to her. And she was like, thank you. And I actually never saw her again.
Weird.
It was strange. And it makes me wonder, like, why didn't she see that?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, these are the things I think about when I'm, like, trying to meditate. It's like, what does that mean? What is, you know, because I want to give to those people, you know, I want to put those people in the highest chambers just so they know what it's like.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I also want to tell them that it's not worth it to live that way, and that I live in a fucking RV, and that my life is scraping by, but it's worth it if you try hard.
Yeah.
And to say that to some people is like, it's so real and so transparent that it would be really draining on me energetically, because every Wednesday at that bar inside, I'm giving to people for free. And if those people are asking me inside of the bar, they might get that that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Maybe
that's part of the answer, is like empowering. Like, maybe we could combine street art with homeless forces. That'd be fucking awesome. Just like give all hobos spray paint and tell them to paint a wall. We'd get some, I don't know,
some free public art projects.
Right. It's a pressing matter for me, man, because it's something that I come up against very frequently, deciding to be a live painter in Austin. Like, there's some nights where I just don't want to go out at all. But then I know, like, I've got to give my presence if I want to.
I need to be doing more of that, man.
Yeah.
You're right.
You're right, dude.
I've never really been able to accomplish anything live painting. To me, it's more, like you said, just being somewhere to talk to people.
Dude, that was one of the advice Maynard gave, was that, like, if you're just there and you don't talk to anybody and you look pissed off, that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Like, just having, and that's true. I think that's true for like the people on the street, you know, just being there, being like, I see you, man.
Yeah.
Have a good one. Like, if that's all you can do it. But I just would like to say that after I hugged that homeless woman, I got really sick. Yeah. Like, my girlfriend and I both got really sick, and we both hugged her, and we both think that's why. because it was like very immediate in the next day. And but I mean, bless that soul, you know. But
yeah,
it's not. No one said it was going to be easy, but it's kind of a perfect. It's kind of like a perfect situation, you know, because it's really generating like this real concern for my other friends and humans and stuff. But somehow, I think art can be a big answer to a lot of the issues that we're seeing. You know, like a lot of the interpersonal problems I've had with people have been resolved through creating art with them.
That's interesting.
Yeah, like, I don't think Byron would mind me saying, I mean, I'll definitely ask him before I publish this, but we went through, like, a very stereotypical brotherly tiff, where, like, we screamed weird names at each other and tried to hurt each other's feelings. But ultimately...
I remember that.
Yeah, oh yeah. I think everybody does, and it's really cool how we're friends. Like, we're friends and we work on art together. And we're about to work on a huge, like, the biggest painting I've ever made on a canvas, ever.
Yeah, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, like, honestly...
How many of y'all are working on it? Like
7.
7?
Yeah, we bumped it up to 7.
Badass.
We were having, like, the most professional painting meeting you can imagine. Like,
well, you know,
which is still very casual.
It's not like there's a ton of us. I mean, even when there is something that goes wrong between people, it's like you kind of are forced to heal that if you want to continue to have the community stay happy and functional, you know. So I think I think that the group requires that people work shit out, you know. I
feel like the level of creativity we're emitting is fragile. Like, let me say that. I think it's very sensitive. And I'm just saying that because that's part of my observation of it, is that every single one of our art friends is a sensitive person who's tapping into a very crucial part of their history. And that can sometimes lead to entitlement, self-doubt, confusion, and then, like, anger, and then, resentment. Those things come from life in general, though. And I think that the reason that we're experiencing it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that we're human. I mean, it has everything to do with the fact that we're human, but it has less to do with the fact that we're painters trying to make it. The fact that we're creating all the time makes us more sensitive, I believe.
It's possible. I don't really know because I can't think of my life in any other way than the way I've lived it. But I do see other people doing vastly different things with their life who go through those same struggles, you know. And not even becoming really successful will keep you from experiencing those things, because there's always something in you that's not going to be right, you know. And sometimes getting what you want out of life actually opens you up to all the things inside yourself that are still wrong, you know, because so many of us are like focused on making it in the outside world, and we don't take care of ourselves inside. And I think I have seen that in people who get to a point in life where they're getting what they want, and yet all of a sudden it turns into inner turmoil, you know, there's a whole nother slew of problems suddenly.
Amy Winehouse is a great example. Like, I have a big place in my heart for that woman for some reason. I think that something happened to her that was really dark, but it could have, but the travesty of it, I think, was like how there was so much attention as a community of humanity that was unable to affect her, or, you know, unable to penetrate the illusion of, like, inebriation. And that illusion of inebriation has a lot to do with how we were talking about how it's not all about the drugs. It's not all about getting high and staying high and constantly having your mind expanded infinitely through the shredding gnar of all psychedelics. But it doesn't hurt to somehow have an open mind. And I guess there's so many different kinds of ways to do that, like there's music. Music has a great relationship to art, painting. I think that there's like a whole light spectrum relationship. I think that it can all be quantified between like the 8 major notes with the flat and minor keys, and then like the 8 primary colors with black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that it can all be interwoven, but it already has, and like this really cool thing called life. And the truth of the matter for me is that like I really appreciate people like you, Greg, because you do bring such beauty to the world that it surprises me. It really does.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. And
I need to hear that.
I know a lot of people really feel that way too. Like we want to support you in so much more ways than we have been. I know, like, as an artist, I haven't been supporting my fellow artists as much as I can in terms of presence, and that's why I'm really glad to talk about that here right now. We're almost done with an hour, man, and I just want to thank you for coming out here. I hope you've had a good time. Like
absolutely, dude. I need to do more of this because it's a dialogue I want to keep going.
Word, man. You know what? Somebody told me in the beginning when I asked them to be a guest on this that they told me it was going to be good for my health for some reason, and I can totally see it.
Just talking, dude. Like
yeah,
just getting things out because I know
it's no interface.
Yeah,
like it's just. I mean, of course, there's a microphone here, and we kind of have to like shy around it for a second, but. This is life.
It is, and until you like have longer conversations, there's always that sort of pretense of just cordial conversation. I know that serves a purpose socially, but it's so much better when you can just actually have like a real talk with people about things that matter.
I think the anxiety that the big anxiety cookie that all people in America have right now has a lot to do with the shorter and shorter iterations of instant gratification through social media / any news thing or anything at all. And it creates, and like, listen to me, it creates mania. Like, that's what it is. There's words for it. It's not actually a new hysteria.
It this down too, though. Like, I let my cell phone write my text now. Like, it already knows what I might want to say, so it'll just suggest it. And I've been actually like trying to retrain my brain to just type from what's in my head rather than be like, oh, my cell phone thinks I'm going to pick these 3 words next and just press on it. And it's like we're slowly losing our ability to think for ourselves.
Check this out. Facebook just changed its algorithm to now it's like it's now observing, it's AI observing what you click on usually.
Yeah.
This is so ass backwards because it's like it's just feeding you. It's the human caterpillar now, dude. They're like, oh, let's just make a shit loop.
I was just reading an article where I think it was.
Oh, please tell me.
Google buying credit card information from some of the credit card companies. So not only do they watch everything you purchase online, but they also have like backdoor access to the rest of your credit card information that isn't preserved on the internet, so it really is like leaking out into the rest of the world. It's not just there's no such thing as like online versus doing things that are off the record. It's all sort of collapsing into each other at this point because it's being tracked somewhere and they're finding that information.
Yeah, dude.
So it's getting weirder and weirder.
That's why cryptocurrency has such like power.
Yeah.
It's because that
it's been doing shitty lately too, though. I don't know what's up with that, but
what's it at?
I think Ethereum's in like 240.
Really?
Yeah, and
240.
Yeah, so it was like up at like 1,200 like back in January.
Dude, I was like, see, I think that I think Bitcoin's too anonymous.
Bitcoin's
right
like
now.
6,000 something right now, so it's. I mean, at least it's
still
has some
6,000.
value. Exactly. But that's about a third of what it was at its peak, like last December. So.
Goodness.
I don't know. It's always a roller coaster. As long as it doesn't completely devalue, if you got a hold of it when it was super cheap, you still have something to show for it. You know?
I imagine there'll be another prosperity era.
Yeah.
I think that it's so new that nobody really understands it yet, and that there's not even like a Bitcoin college. But I told Michael Garfield he should make one. And then, that's a whole nother podcast. I'd be down to talk for another hour, but I got my girlfriend there, and I've actually got to go do tons of work for this festival. But I want to say this right now,
dude.
Greg. Can you just really quickly, or I mean, briefly go over your workshop at Co-Creation?
Sure. So I'm going to be teaching, it's really probably just going to be 2 classes, which will be Friday and Saturday, and we might do sort of a wrap-up Sunday if people want to. But I'm teaching a class on, it's basically landscape painting, but with a sort of abstract, hypnotic sort of premise, i.e. we're not going to be painting mountains and clouds. We're just going to explore some techniques to make a mess, and then take what we've made and start isolating pieces of it and playing around with atmospheric perspective, just showing how to kind of let the painting show itself, and then you make those decisions in terms of what you want to really stand out between object and background and whatnot. So I don't know if that sounds too complicated, but
I mean, that sounds really beautiful. But I guess, if you want your art to really be taken to the next level, this is going to be a really great way to start thinking about art from a new direction. And it's also a really good way to make friends that also make art, just saying. And then if you're making a painting at this workshop, you'll also be able to work on it throughout the festival. So please come and include yourself and participate. Tickets are on sale right now. The Co-Creation 2018 website. It'll be linked in this video. Thank you so much for coming, Greg.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Yeah, dude. I love you, man. I love your art. I'll see you around, alright?
Alright, dude.
Peace.
Wow.